There. Give me a signal, Justin, when you think we can convene.
Okay, Ken.
No, yeah.
Okay, we're good to go.
Yep, I
Good
think
morning,
so.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Lake George Park Commission monthly meeting number 513, Tuesday, January 25th, and the meeting is being held by video conference. Jumping right to our agenda, we've got a busy one this morning. We've had introductions, roll call. Do we have someone here that could tell us that we have a
Quorum.
We do. We have a quorum.
okay, quorum,
Thanks,
thank you.
Michelle.
You're welcome.
And you all have seen, and I hope had a chance to review the minutes of the previous meeting. Motion to approve those minutes, or motion made, motion seconded. All in favor? Any nays? Motion is carried to approve the minutes. Fiscal actions, report and expenditures. You've all had that report in front of you to review. Any comments or questions on that? Motion to accept the fiscal actions. Motion made, motion seconded. All in favor, signify please by any nays, none seen. Fiscal action committee's fiscal action report is accepted. Now, item 3, Lake George Park Commission septic update. I've got some notes I'd like to discuss on behalf of everyone, and I'm going to be prepared to offer a resolution at the end of the comments. And I want to just get a couple of items for everyone's benefit, the public's benefit primarily, onto the record about what we've been doing for the last 8 months. 8 months ago, Chairman Young formed a internal committee of the Park Commission, and by internal, just members of the Park Commission meeting. And at the same time, we formed what we called our septic ad hoc committee meeting, which consisted of 14 members of the community, including professionals, municipal leaders, et cetera, et cetera. And they were all charged with thinking about the fact that the Lake George Park Commission is tasked in New York State environmental conservation law with the long-term protection of Lake George. Septic systems, when not properly constructed or maintained, can have significant impacts to water bodies through nutrient and pollutant inputs. This report seeks to identify concepts for septic system inspections around Lake George, working in concert with state and local experts, partners, municipalities, and stakeholders. And I would also add that members of that ad hoc committee included senior people from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the New York State Department of Health. And all the words that I'm saying are available on our website, have been for quite some time. And all of our ad hoc committees meetings have been held by Zoom, and we've welcomed anybody from the public who wanted to attend, of course. And we had many, many of you who offered your ideas and advice and comments and suggested improvements or corrections. Lake George Park is home to more than 6,000 properties that maintain on-site wastewater treatment systems, also known as septic systems. A large number of these systems are within close proximity to the lake shore and its many streams. Septic systems, when properly designed, installed, and maintained, should have very little impact on public health or nearby water bodies. However, when one of these factors falls short, these systems can fail and cause significant issues. The Park Commission is a New York State agency charged with the long-term protection of Lake George under Article 43 of the Environmental Conservation Law. And that law also relates to the creation of regulations to ensure that septic systems are not impacting public health or the quality of Lake George. Jumping down on this, and this is all coming from the executive summary, which is available for your reading. Tasks set forth for this initiative included a detailed literature review of relevant studies in the state and region, an analysis of the geologic and environmental factors that may impact systems from functioning around Lake George, and a review of all other recurrent lake-based septic inspection programs throughout New York State. Over the last 8 months, these analyses were conducted and presented to the ad hoc committee and the interested public. The results of these analyses indicate that Lake George is prone to impacts from failing systems and that a recurrent, and we're talking about every 5 years, septic system program would help ensure that septic systems near Lake George and its tributaries are functioning properly. All specifics of program details will be outlined in these documents, and the public would have considerable opportunity to comment prior to action taken by the commission to approve any new regulations. And on that, I would say that any regulation that the park commission or any state body gets passed by the New York State government are subject to public hearings, and it's always been the park commission's modus operandi, if you will, to hold any necessary public hearings during the warmer months of the year, because at this time of year, we believe we lose about 50% of our property owners, rightfully so. There might be in a place that's a little nicer than it is here today. So rest assured that there just is nothing being done behind the curtain. It's all being done up front. And you folks will have a chance to maybe make a comment later today at the end of our regular park commission meeting, but you're also going to have a chance to go on the record at the public hearings, which will be well publicized, et cetera. It's not our intention to get this law passed overnight. We've been working on it for almost a year, and it'll probably be sometime in 2023 before it actually becomes law, presuming that we get that far, and I certainly hope that we do. Having said that, I have a resolution 2022-01. And I'm going to read it in entirety. It's not terribly long. Whereas the Lake George Park Commission is charged with the long-term protection of Lake George and its unparalleled water quality, and whereas improperly functioning wastewater treatment systems, known as septic systems, can have deleterious impacts upon public health and nearby water bodies, including Lake George, and whereas the commission is empowered by Article 43 of the New York State Environmental Conservation Law to develop regulations pertaining to wastewater treatment systems in the Lake George Park, and whereas in the summer of 2021, the commission formed an ad hoc committee comprised of representatives from New York State DEC, New York State DOH, and local municipalities, as well as engineers and subject matter professionals to research and investigate the need for a proactive inspection program for septic systems within proximity of Lake George. And whereas this committee found that a recurrent septic system inspection program would ensure the functionality and viability of these systems surrounding Lake George and its tributaries, similar to programs in many other lakes around New York State. And whereas the committee also identified a need for increased design standards for septic systems for properties in the Lake George Park to help protect localized environments and public health. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the commission hereby moves to begin the formal process of regulation development pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the State Administrative Procedure Act. And further resolved that the commission will continue to work collaboratively with all involved and interested agencies, municipalities, and stakeholders throughout this process to ensure public participation and awareness, resulting in the most effective program possible, balancing the needs of environmental protection and costs to the regulated community. And I would look for a motion on that.
Move to approve.
A motion made, a motion seconded. All in favor of the resolution 2022-01, please signify with the term. And we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion is made, seconded, and passed. And with that, David, you want to speak upon the secret environmental assessment, or are we going to have look to Carla for that?
I think we're going to look to Carla for that.
Okay.
So what you have before you is the full environmental assessment form. The resolution you just adopted was based on this form. This form is the beginning of the seeker process. The seeker process is the next step moving forward in this matter. So what you have before you all is a completed part 1. And the resolution that you just adopted indicates that based on this EAF, you are willing to take lead agency status. And so all of the agencies, DEC, DOH, different municipalities, anyone with permitting authority will receive a copy of the resolution, the EAF, and the concept paper, which is on our website, indicating that this is where the commission is moving. So unless there's some concerns with any of the information set forth in the EAF, we really just need a consensus that this EAF can be signed by the executive director.
Do we have any comments from the commissioners? All approving this process signify with a normal sign. Seeing no objections, you have the approval to carry that forward.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Parker, that approval is all incorporated in the resolution that the board did adopt. So the next step would be everyone, for the next 30 days, the other interested agencies and involved agencies will decide whether or not the Park Commission will be lead agency. And then once that's decided, the Park Commission can move forward with the seeker process, going through the part 2 and part 3. So that's kind of the next couple steps down the road in the next few months.
And I'm just going to reiterate for all in attendance and as plain words as I can conjure up, we did not just pass a septic regulation for the Lake George Basin. We adopted the ability to continue the process to determine whether it will become a regulation. Remembering that this is being done not by past reports, not by anybody's ideas. This is based totally on the science and the mechanics of the septic world. And with that, we'll go to item 4, Eurasian milfoil. And Mr. Wick, you have a project going on there.
We do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we have with us Glenn Sullivan. Glenn is a certified lake manager with Solitude Lake Management. Glenn has been working with us for about the past year to discuss the idea of a new aquatic herbicide for spot treatments on Lake George. We've been working with Warren County Soil and Water Bombard on some plant surveys and working with Glenn to identify whether such an opportunity would be possible. I asked Glenn to kind of put together a little bit of background and be able to answer questions for the commissioners and then the general public about what such an application might include, what any impacts might be. As you know, the commission is the lead agency working with its partners, primarily the Lake George Association, on milfoil control on Lake George. And while we're making great strides, some areas have proven very challenging to address for the long term. And we would be remiss if we weren't looking at all the tools in the toolbox to try to do the best we can at the best cost possible. So we've enlisted Glenn's assistance, working with Glenn and the Adirondack Park Agency to see if this is a viable possibility for Lake George. I believe, Glenn, you are a co-host for this meeting, and you're going to be able to share your screen for your brief presentation, but maybe Glenn, you can provide a little background about yourself and some of the work that you've done, and then you can start up. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for giving me a few moments to go over the Lake George trial project, the Priscilla core and milfoil control. I'm going to attempt to share the screen right now and just tell me if this works for you.
You're in.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. That's good. It confuses me because now it's on my right instead of directly in front of me. So we're going to talk about a little bit about Priscilla core. I'll give you some background. I'll give you some information on how we've used it. And then we'll talk about what we're going to do. As Dave suggested, I'll give you a little background on myself. I am currently a project manager for New York projects and our single Ontario project for Solitude Lake Management. I've been doing that since 2015, which is when I sold my previous company, Allied Biological, to the company that is now Solitude. So I've been working in the field for 29 years now. I've been a certified lake manager for most of that. And I've spent about 20 years, first 20 years as a board member for the Northeast Aquatic Plant Management Society. And I'm currently the president of the New York State Aquatic Managers Association, which is really just it's a focus group of people that are doing aquatic plant management in the state, and it gives us an opportunity to communicate more directly with DEC. So let's get into Priscilla core, and I've only got 5 slides here, essentially 4 if you disregard the title slide. So feel free to interrupt me if you have questions as we go along. It's just easier for me to discuss these things as we go. Priscilla core EC, it's an aquatic herbicide. It's effectively a new generation of aquatic herbicide. It was registered by the EPA in February of 2018 and registered as what's called a reduced risk herbicide. And that means its environmental profile is significantly better than its comparable aquatic herbicides that have been used for the several years now. So that made registration through EPA go much smoother. It was registered in 2019 with the DEC. New York always goes through its own process regardless of the EPA's registration. So there's an extra year before they approved it in New York. Currently, actually, we have an environmental registration or experimental registration in Canada as well that we've started working on. So it really has moved through the registration process pretty quick because it's such a environmentally favorable aquatic herbicide. It's what's called an auxin mimic herbicide. It causes plants to outgrow their food reserves. All right. It is a new generation, so it is significantly different from other auxin herbicides, auxin mimic herbicides. The dose rate is significantly lower. So typically in an auxin mimic herbicide, we're talking about using it at a rate of 1 to maybe 3 parts per million, whereas Priscilla core we're using at a rate typically under 10 parts per billion. So it's significantly less herbicide in the water, much lower concentration. It is equally, if not more selective than the other herbicides, which means it gives you great control of your milfoils, but really limits any impact to other target plants, even better than the other auxin mimic herbicides. It has a very short contact exposure time. So instead of having to keep that herbicide in contact with your plant for a week or a month, whatever that time is, it's only a matter of a couple of days, and that herbicide dissipates from the water very rapidly. So there's a lot of reasons why it's a more favorable product, not only to control milfoil, but to use in the state of New York. We used it for the first time back in 2019 in Snyder's Lake. Snyder's Lake is about a 100-acre lake. It's just east of Albany. If you can see the map here, the dots on the map represent sample points, plant sampling points. The yellow dots are points where there were no plants because this is a deep lake with a very narrow shoreline littoral zone. So the blue dots are where milfoil was found prior to treatment. And that was roughly 52% of the sample points had Eurasian water milfoil. Plants were present in about 70% of the sample points. That was pre-treatment. We treated in June of 2019. And by the end of the season, I think we did our sampling in August, Eurasian water milfoil was absent completely. It wasn't present at any of the sampling sites. And plants were still present at all of the original sampling sites. So our selectivity was fantastic, and our control of Eurasian water milfoil was excellent. We went on to our first use in the Adirondack Park was in 2020 at Minerva Lake. Minerva Lake is in central New York. It is up 28 in the direction of Minerva, and beyond that, it's about 80 acres, so it's a relatively small lake. It had Eurasian water milfoil throughout probably 80% of the shoreline. And what we did is we designed an application that covered 41 acres of the 8-acre lake. My apologies for my dog. Mostly in the more dense spots and away from the outlets. Our control was outstanding for the first year. We saw very little impact to non-target species. The main non-target impacts were with 2 species of water lilies, Nufar, which is spatterdock. Those plants exhibited what's called epinasty, where the plant's stems twist. It was temporary, and before the season had ended, those plants had outgrown any impact, so you couldn't really tell anymore. And then another water lily called water shield, which is a much smaller leaf. Those disappeared pretty rapidly along with the Eurasian water milfoil, but they returned within about a month and a half back to the lake. So that is probably the biggest non-target impact we saw. And again, it was temporary. After a season of sampling at Minerva, second season, we didn't see any Eurasian water milfoil in our plant survey. The only thing that happened was I went back out in what I'd say was early fall. I think it was late September. I went back out and just did my own survey by kayak. I found a single plant in the non-treatment area. So that was after a full second season, we ended up with just one plant that was easily hand collected. We've also used this at Saratoga Lake in 2021. Some of the larger lakes that we've used it at that you might be aware of, Cazenovia Lake near Syracuse, Juanita and Lamoka Lakes. Those are both about 800-acre lakes in the Finger Lakes region. We've used it at Chautauqua Lake out in Western New York. That's about 13,000 acres. So it's really become, when it comes to Eurasian water milfoil control, it has replaced the other aquatic herbicides we would typically use. And it's done so because it's been so effective and because it is such a low rate. So for Lake George, we've got 2 pilot treatment locations. Both are about 4 acres. One is in the Glen Burnie section. It's called Blair's Bay. So it's in the town of Putnam on the northeast side of the lake. The other one is in Sheep Meadow Bay. It's in the town of Dresden, sort of the middle eastern section of the lake. These are relatively small plots. So our application rate is going to be about roughly 8 parts per billion. All right. Now in the state of New York, there's a threshold for what they call unspecified contaminants for drinking water. And that threshold is 50 parts per billion. So we're applying this well below the drinking water threshold. We don't anticipate any drinking water restrictions or impacts at all. There are certain irrigation and livestock watering impacts. There's a threshold of 1 part per billion. And the reason that that's there is because the manufacturer didn't feel it was necessary to go through the level of toxicology testing to get a specific threshold. And when you don't do that, your threshold becomes 1. In the treatment work that we've done so far, and I'll talk about Snyder's and Minerva and Cazenovia in particular, the measurable concentration of the herbicide has disappeared within 3 to 7 days. So at Minerva, we have to do testing, or we had to do testing at 24, 48 hours, 3 days, and 7 days. And by the time we did the sampling, the 3-day sampling, there was no measurable concentration left. So we were below that 1 part per billion threshold. It was also 3 days at Snyder's Lake. At Casanova Lake, we did a 1 day, 2 day, and 7 day, and by the 7th day, it was disappeared from the water column as well. So we, as David mentioned, Bob Bombard from Water County Soil and Water Conservation District did our plant surveys, and they have been submitted to the state along with the permit applications that we filed. And they're under review now with the APA and the DEC. The notification letter has gone out to the group of people that would be in the what we call the dilution zone for those treatment areas. In the Blairs Bay area, that was probably about 30 to 40 people. In the Sheep Meadow Bay area, I'd say that number was closer to 20 people or so. So these are relatively small areas that the dilution of the herbicide will actually reach a measurable concentration. Assuming approvals come in, we plan to do both applications in a single day during June. Each application will take maybe an hour, a little over an hour. Probably take longer to transit between both sites than it will actually do an application. Any questions?
Glenn, can you mention the long-term efficacy of the treatments that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, as I said, we started treating in 2019 in New York, and we did not see, other than that single plant, the year after treatment in Minerva, we haven't seen regrowth there. I was just on the emails with Amy Smagula from New Hampshire, who has guided their treatments in New Hampshire, and they started their treatments in 2018. And they said that they are still seeing very good control through the 3rd year of treatment there. Now, a lot of the New Hampshire treatments have been with variable leaf water milfoil instead of Eurasian. But in the Eurasian water milfoil treatments that they've done, they are still seeing good control 3 years in. The manufacturer offers what I'll call a limited warranty that is good for 3 years if you meet their requirements. I haven't found it necessary. We haven't had a client who's actually taken us up on it, but what it signifies really is that there's a strong level of confidence that you're going to get, a solid 3 years of control with this herbicide. And I would expect, although there may be some regrowth, typically your regrowth is going to be on a limited scale, and that allows you to come in and do hand harvesting, diver-assisted suction harvesting to continue your management on it.
Do you understand if there is no residual because it disappears from the water quality or water table or column quickly?
Yeah.
But you're saying it seems like it must have some kind of a residual mechanism. Do you understand that at all? How can it keep controlling for 3 years? I don't get that.
Well, it is a systemic herbicide. So unlike a contact herbicide that kills the green portion of the plant, the systemic herbicide gets down into the root structure of the plant and kills the root structure. So your regrowth doesn't come from plants that have been controlled. It comes from either reintroduction, or it comes from root structures that didn't send a plant up during the treatment period, and so therefore weren't impacted. So that's how you get your long-term control.
Okay.
Are there any conditions or locations that you wouldn't use the product?
Well, putting a product directly in front of a pretty a high flow inlet is always going to not work as well. But both of these sites are excellent sites for trials. Absolutely.
How does it affect particles that are floating in the water when you apply it?
It's not a coagulant, so it's not going to impact anything that's in the water. It'll stay in the water for, I would say, less than 24 hours, but it's going to be picked up by the Eurasian water milfoil, but it's not going to impact other particles.
I think Glenn, he was asking about fragments, maybe.
Okay.
Fragments.
Eurasian water milfoil fragments are viable. So they're in the water column. They're going to uptake the herbicide as well if they're in that treatment area.
Oh, good.
Glenn,
Yep.
2 questions. Have you seen any impact on macroalgae such as Nitella? First
Yeah.
question.
We haven't seen any impact, and honestly, I don't expect any impact on the macroalgae.
Well, have you tested it in lakes with Nitella? I guess I should ask.
Cazenovia has some Nitella in it. It also has some starry stonewort, which is another macroalgae. We didn't see any impact there.
The second question I had, talking about the new FAR, did you ever, has anyone ever looked at the root mass, the rhizomatous root mass, to see if there was any accumulation of the herbicide in that?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I've ever read, no.
So you're answering that no, you don't know, or there isn't any?
I would say I don't know. I don't know if that's been looked at directly.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
the impact on Newfar at Minerva was interesting because the plants that were mature and flowering at the time of the herbicide application definitely exhibited the epinasty, the stem twisting. The plants that weren't fully exposed and in flower didn't actually exhibit any impact. So when we went back to do the follow-up survey, you could see some evidence of plants that were mature at the time, but all the other plants were still in flower. So it almost seemed like maybe it just gave them a little bit of a delay.
On the 3 projects that you named,
Yeah.
was the client like a homeowners association, or was the client an entity such as overlooking the water, such as the Lake George Park Commission?
The first one, Snyder's Lake, is a homeowners association. The Minerva, that was the town of Minerva, was the client. Cazenovia, it's the town of Cazenovia is the client. Out at Chautauqua Lake, that's an interesting one. The Chautauqua Lake Partnership is the client for permitting, but then there are 6 towns and villages that are the actual application clients. So most of these have been municipal clients.
Regarding the drinking water,
Mhm.
the application rate below 10 parts per billion, but the drinking water threshold is 50 parts per billion.
Yeah.
Do you still do a drinking water advisory for any period of time, or do you just, in this case, in June, would we not even concern ourselves and the residents would continue to drink the water during the application period?
Yeah, there would be no drinking water restriction because we are below that threshold.
Wow.
One other question related to that, Glenn. In New York State's permit, did they give any different precautions? I'm looking at the precautions of EPA
Yeah.
than New York. Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Are you,
Yeah, that's a good question. In the EPA, the federal label, there are the restrictions on livestock watering and on greenhouse nursery and hydroponic irrigation are not specified. There's not a number associated with them. And that bothered the DEC. So the DEC on their supplemental label included a numbers, essentially 1 part per billion as a threshold for those uses.
Glenn, can you
Yep.
hear me?
Yeah.
So I would like to simplify this. Procellicor is an organic substance. Stop me if I said anything incorrect here. So therefore, it's not soluble in water. So it's going to be taken up by the milfoil. And then the milfoil will be harvested, removed from the lake, and there really should not be any residual Procellicor left in the water. Is
Well,
that?
Not long after the treatment, there won't be any milfoil to harvest in that area. All right, so you know the amount of time it takes for that plant to to die, drop to the bottom is probably going to be around 2 to 3 weeks. All right. So you wouldn't want to go in there and harvest. You wouldn't want to bother to go in there and harvest in the treatment area. But within a 3-week period, that milfoil won't be there anymore. So you won't have any harvesting need in that area.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we there, David?
I think so. Thank you, Glenn. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Dave,
Yes, sir.
if this was approved by the approving bodies, not the Lake George Park Commission, what would be the time frame for applying this to any waters in Lake George?
My understanding is the end of May, first week of June, Glenn, if that's correct.
Yeah, I would say we're probably more in the 1st to 2nd week of June.
Because of the plant growth and the water
Yeah.
temperature.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, we have heard about Procella this morning. Thank you.
One more question.
Yes.
It doesn't occur to me that we, as a park commission, have voted on this. Maybe I'm wrong. Do we have to approve this, or is this, or not?
We've never taken a formal vote on it, Bill. We've been talking about it since Lee Walrath came last April, and we gave a presentation on the 2 areas that we were considering, did all that work. I've had conversations with several commissioners about the topic, but there's been no formal vote taken. That would be up to the chairman if he wants to move forward in that direction.
So, but my question is, in order to go forward with this, is a vote of this commission required, or it is
not.
be up to the chairman? Okay.
It's up to the chairman.
And when do we expect to hear approvals or ayes or nays from the approving body from the state?
Glenn?
I think the DEC approval will probably happen within about a month. The APA will take a little bit longer, but I expect that both approvals, assuming we get them, will probably be in by the beginning of May.
Okay. Why don't we schedule a,
Can I ask one quick question first? Glenn,
Yeah.
these are all test samples on a large area,
Yeah.
when you apply it
Mhm.
and the plant dies within 2 or 3 weeks
Yeah.
in a large, dense bed, the nutrient is still there. Is that nutrient going to cause other things to bloom?
Okay.
Okay.
Good
I
question.
mean, you are these little test samples are great, but a large, dense bed in Lake George where you kill it, we're not destroying the nutrient. We're just changing the form of the nutrient, and now that nutrient is available.
Yeah, and that is more the case, I think, when you're using a contact herbicide and you're doing it, let's say midsummer. All right, if you're going to go out there and knock a plant down in 3 days in the middle of the summer, and that plant is abundant, then you have that concern. But with the systemic herbicide, first of all, the plant doesn't drop that fast. All right, so the nutrients aren't released into the water column, or at least not to the same degree. You're also doing it much earlier in the season. All right, so your impact to water quality isn't as great because you're doing it in colder water that's more oxygenated. All right, and again, you're taking out one species. All right, you're not taking out, for instance, at Snyder's Lake, we did that in early June, and I think we had about 30 species of plants there. So when you take one plant out of 30 species, Yeah, you're reducing the biomass, but there's still sufficient biomass there to uptake nutrients. So you're probably just moving it from one plant species to another.
Okay, thank you.
Just in my mind, I had these beds falling to the bottom and the silt becoming,
Yeah,
even richer than it is.
yeah,
Uh,
that won't be the case.
Okay,
thank
I
you.
forgot about the early spring. That's awesome. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. In responding back to our question, it'd be my thoughts that we follow the approval process with the state and with the APA and re-enter this conversation and perhaps ask Glenn to come back and talk to us again as we make a decision on it. There's no decision process today, obviously. Let's find out what the higher authorities, if they have any comments or can lead us to any better conclusion. I mean, on the surface right now, it sounds like the way to go, but I don't think we're prepared to make that decision today. So, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, folks.
Any other commissioners have any comments regarding the subject? Moving on to project review actions report. Joe Tuen, Joe Stanek, do we have a resolution for it?
Resolution 2022-02, accept project review actions report. Whereas the commission has received and reviewed the project review actions report prepared by the staff and dated January 18th, 2022. And whereas the project review committee recommends acceptance of the project review actions report, now therefore be resolved that the commission directs that the project review actions report be incorporated in the minutes of the full commission meeting. So moved.
Motion, second, I see. All in favor, signify, please. Any nays? Carried. Joe Tuen, you want to introduce the first project of Class A Marina application by Mr. Arnstein for Town of Queensbury?
Yes, thank you. So the first application, as the Vice Chairman noted, is by Ted Arnstein. He's looking to establish a new Class A marina offering sales and water-based instruction of e-foils. The property is located at 52 Boathouse Road, and is located in Harris Bay. I can see Jeff Anthony has joined us from Studio A, is representing the applicant. So Jeff, I'd invite you to introduce yourself and talk about the application a little bit more.
Mr. Chairman,
I see Mr. Mason's hand raised.
before we get started, I just wanted to inform all the commissioners, I live right next door to this project. I have no interest in it, but much of the input you've received are the owners of this association that I'm in. And I have a huge financial interest in keeping them happy. And as such, I've got a giant conflict here. And so I will be kind of signing out and recusing myself from this one. Okay.
You're recusing yourself from any discussion on this and any voting. Okay.
Absolutely.
Very
Thank
clear.
you.
Thank you. And I assume that still leaves us with a vote of 6. Is that right, Dave or Michelle?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Joe. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. I was just actually turning it over to Jeff. Jeff, do you want to talk about the application a bit?
Hey, Kirsten. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jeff Anthony from Studio A, and we represent Ted Arnstein, who is the property owner. And he is in partnership with Aiden Switzer, who is going to be the operator of the marina facility, or the education facility, let's call it. The facility is really a teaching facility for e-foil products. Basically, e-foil products are battery operated boards that they look like a wakeboard, but they're battery operated. You don't use any fossil fuels. There's very little noise, no noise. And they're basically a watercraft that has been, since last month or two ago, the Park Commission has recognized them as a watercraft that's eligible for being used on Lake George, I believe. The project is to reuse 52 Bowhouse Road parcel, which currently has a house on it, a single-family home. Single-family home has a little in-law apartment in it. The in-law apartment will be the office, and it'll be used for the indoor training facility for people who are wanting to learn about how to use an e-foil product. The garage at the residence will be used for storing any parts or equipment. And really, there's absolutely no servicing proposed on these e-foils. There are no oils, fuels, gasolines, or anything else in the process or in the whole operation. So the garage is used for storing the boards that are used for training. Occasionally, there will be a board that will be delivered for someone who's purchasing it. And obviously, those will be put in the garage until somebody comes to pick it up. The physical facility has no construction proposed. There's an existing driveway. There's the existing parking area. The house is there. The in-law apartment will be used. There'll be, obviously, interior will be reconditioned, so has the bedroom space and other things taken out, and there'll be like a little office space. There's a restroom in there, and that will be used for the patrons. And there is an existing dock on the waterfront, which will be used to launch the e-foils by hand when they are in use. The project was before the town of Queensbury several months ago, and we had to have a special use permit and site plan review conducted by the town planning board. The town planning board unanimously approved that application, and the special use permit was for, in Queensbury's rules and regulations, it was for the operation of a marina facility. And so those were approved by the town of Queensbury. As part of that review, Queensbury staff reviewed the wastewater system on the property and deemed that it was suitable and acceptable for use in this facility. Early on in this project, we were thinking of using porta-johns and not using the on-site wastewater system, but during the project review, Queensbury determined that the wastewater system is up to date, acceptable, and operational, and suitable for use for this facility. Now, the operation of this is interesting. I believe we gave you a whole bunch of information for questions that were asked in your review by Joe Thuen, but this is not a rental facility. This is not a facility which is going to have several people come and rent e-foils and go out and party on a lake. This is a teaching facility. It's a training facility. The operator, Aiden Spitzer, will be the only employee on site. He will conduct teaching and training, both in-house, inside, in the building. So he will instruct on the use of these e-foils, the safety of them, operations of them, other particulars about the e-foils, and navigational rules and the like. After completing a training session with a person, you'll then take them out onto the lake for an actual demonstration or training in the field. One of the questions that were asked during the review period by the commission was how many people will be on the water at one time. Well, there's one instructor and one person who is employee, and typically it'll be one student, possibly two students, which will typically be in a training session. Husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, two friends. And usually the instructor will only have one or two people with them, and the instructor will be with that person for the entire duration of the session. So the operation is minimal. There is no walk-in business proposed here. There's no sales office here, no sales room where people can come and look at e-foils to peruse them and see if they want to buy one. The operation is only by appointment. If someone wants to receive training in e-foils, they'll make an appointment. An appointment will usually run about 2 hours for a training session. They will be in the presence of Mr. Spitzer throughout. And if you take a normal business day, that would mean that if Mr. Spitzer works a full day, sun up to sunrise, he may get 5 sessions in, maybe at the most, on a busy day. So that's basically the operations of this facility. I would like to answer any questions if the commissioners have any. I know there were a bunch of questions in the request for additional information that Joe Thuen put out, and I think we provided you information on that. Oh, one other thing. Operation of these on the lake is really restricted to the southern end of Cloverdale Bay. And the operation of these in terms of when will they be on the water, they won't be on the water. They will be on the water only during the daylight hours. They will not be on the water when there is heavy boat traffic, when there is heavy wake or other types of waves that are happening. They will not be on the water when there's a weather advisory. And as soon as there is any sign of a thunderstorm or storm coming up, they're removed from the lake. And there are safety features on these e-foils that are available to the operator, such as kill switches, 45-degree. If the board goes over 45-degree angle, it automatically shuts off. There is a monitor on it to determine when a battery is going low, and it warns the operator that he's got so many minutes to get back to shore. There are several safety features on these that are built into the system. And again, I guess without going any further, if you have any questions, I would like to answer them for you. Mr. Arnstein's away on vacation, I believe, right now, so he's not here. And Aiden Switzer, who will be the manager of this facility, is away also. So I'm kind of at your mercy. Try to tell you as much as I know about these things, as I am not an e-foil expert.
I have a question.
I have a just hang on for a second, Joe. I have a question for Joe and Dave and Carla. Always had a concern about the word marina and marina permit. Can the commission allow a marina permit to be issued that would be very, very narrow in its scope? And we know what we're talking about today. In other words, it would limit it to that one single sole activity. It wouldn't allow a used boat dealership to pop up next season because this endeavor wasn't terribly profitable. So long as we got a marina permit, let's do a lot of other things. Question mark.
That's a great question, and I can field that and turn it over to Carla to correct me where I'm wrong. But the way we issue all our marina permits is very explicit. There's different activities that all count as Class A marinas. Any expansion of services or expansion in the type of service requires a new or modified permit. So if you wanted to expand, the number of customers you look to entertain, or expand the services, such as you mentioned, boat sales or something along those lines, each of those would require a new review, a fresh review, come back to the board to modify that marina permit.
And Joe took the words right out of my mouth. He just unmuted before I did.
Thank you. Now, Joe Stanek, I interrupted you.
Okay. Does the instructor, is he on an e-foil or is he in a boat?
No, thanks, Joe. The instructor is on an e-foil and he is participating side by side with the student. There are no other vehicles, boats, or other accessories on the water at the time of instruction. So the instructor has an e-foil, the student has an e-foil. Quite frankly, I believe, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school here, I believe that Adirondack e-foil as a company only has 3 e-foils. So they would have one for the instructor and two for possible students. Not that they couldn't buy more, but these are relatively expensive pieces of equipment. I think they cost over $12,000 a piece. Again, that's what I understand. I'm not an expert at e-foils. So to answer your question directly, Joe, all instructions will be under the direct supervision of Mr. Switzer, who is the only employee of the facility. And he will be there during training on site, or on land, and he will be there for training on the water with the students. Again, like I said, no student will be allowed to take an e-foil out without Mr. Spitzer being the instructor with them. So this is not a rental facility where a bunch of kids can come along, say, I want to rent 6 of these things and go out and party on a lake. That doesn't happen here. And it can be specifically prohibited in any approval you may make, but there's no rental. Mr. Spitzer's insurance company does not allow rentals, as a matter of fact. So he is not insured to rent this equipment and put it out onto the lake unsupervised.
Yeah, we visited the site, Jeff, and given the traffic in the area, as you said, you won't go out when there's a lot of boat traffic, and also the complaints or comments received. We're thinking of putting in a possible pilot session where you'd be permit for 1 year. Do you have any issues with that?
No, I talked to Joe Thulin about this a bit yesterday, and in the past, over the last several months, when I have been talking with both Mr. Arnstein and Spitzer, they fully understand that there could be conditions to this permit if it's approved. And so a 1-year pilot program to see how the operation functions, see if it's bothering any neighbors, or see if it's getting out of control or not following the rules and regulations, or not following the promises that they make. Yes, that's totally acceptable to the applicants.
Good.
Joe Stanek, I have a question for you as having been there, having boated by this exact location hundreds of times over 40 years. I try and picture what it looks like. Is this a spot on Lake George that I could be pulling my kids on a tube or water skis and would water ski past this location?
I believe so. It's
Okay.
just beyond the 5-mile permits, I think, at this point.
On the outside of the 5-mile permit.
Right.
So there's acceptable activities in the waters in front of this proposed location.
Right. Yep.
Mr. Parker, Ken, can I
Yes.
speak one thing?
Sure
I know
thing.
that one of the questions that was asked during the review by the commission was how far out do these things operate? They have to operate in 4 feet water and deeper when they're actually functioning. And they're usually going to be operating more than 200 feet from the shore. And we provided a map that showed the area west of Cleverdale Point Peninsula at the southern end of that bay where they would be conducting their training. So they would be limited to that area, or at least that's where they're planning on doing their training.
Right.
Yeah, and for clarity on that, Jeff, if I can jump in, according to NAV law, and Lieutenant can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe these have to be, except for coming in and out of the dock, these have to be operated at least 100 feet from shore, and docks, moorings, anchored boats, things of that nature. So just an FYI, really. And I suspect if a permit's issued, we'll probably build that in as a condition, just as a reminder.
Any other questions from the commissioners to the applicant or of each other?
Ken,
Yes, Kath.
when we were there, I think somebody brought up the concern about the availability of parking, that they thought that this is such a novelty that the person that's taking the lesson would bring, his friends or her friends, a lot of extra people to be, to look at what was going down. And we were a little concerned about the extra people there that probably would not be necessary, and if there was enough parking space, and would that cause more of a congestion?
Good question, and perhaps that's one of the reasons that we're discussing doing this on a one-year pilot.
Yeah.
Ken, I can give you some information about that if it's helpful.
Okay.
There is a driveway that comes off of Boathouse Road, and it's paved, and it accesses the house that's there. And there's a 2 or 3 car paved parking lot right there now. But in addition to that, we're not proposing using it, but out at where the driveway meets Boathouse Road, the property owner, Mr. Arnstein, actually owns the land that fronts on the road. He currently leases that to Lake George Boat Company for their parking. He's not proposing taking it away, but it is available if it became a problem. But in this operation, it's by appointment only. That we do not expect, or we're not going to be advertising people to come and look at an e-foil to buy, or to look in a showroom or anything like that. So we're expecting Mr. Arnstein, Mr. Spitzer's car to be there as the operator, and then a car to show up every 2 hours with 1 or 2 people in it for a 2-hour session. There'll be a little changeover, obviously, if we have back-to-back. So there might be 1 car parked while one party's leaving, while another party's arriving. So at most, I think there's 3 cars that would be on the site at one time, which there is adequate parking for. Not that we want to use it, but there's a bunch of lawn area there, which obviously we don't want to have people mess up the lawn, but there is overflow parking available, but we don't expect that to be used at all.
Okay,
Thank you.
It behooves me to advise the interested parties that with the recusal of Commissioner Mason, we have 6 commissioners on board, which is what we internally call a short board. And that means that the application would require all 6 votes to the affirmative to pass. And by history and custom, the commission has always advised our applicants of that and given them the opportunity that if they want to table the application and wait till the next meeting, which hopefully would have more than 6, you have that opportunity to do. So in other words, you get an opportunity right now to say, I'll gamble on the 6. I'm going to lose with 1 negative vote, or I'd like to wait. And that's your choice.
Thanks, Ken. I don't like to roll dice, but if this was, if let's say we went for a vote now and it was denied, do we have any provisions to come back and make a reapplication?
Yes, we do.
We do.
And what would be the conditions of that, Carla?
Pardon me?
Carla's going to give us some more advice.
To come back and reapply, you'd have to have a different project, and I don't think that's what you want to do here.
No.
Unless I'm mistaken.
That's true. Well, I guess the best thing to do, and without my client being present, would be to ask you to table this till the next meeting, because I don't think I have the authority to ask for a vote that could be turned down. And so why don't we table it until next meeting?
Okay. Commissioner Stanek?
May I ask the other commissioners if they have any complaints or any comments that are negative, so that he might be prepared in the future if there was a table vote here?
Well, with Justin's assistance, I'll do a informal discussion and start with you.
Okay, I'm in favor of giving him a pilot with according to the restrictions that are in the regulations for e-foils.
Okay.
For 1
Kathy,
year.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For 1 year.
For 1 year.
Yeah.
Kathy, I can see you.
I concur with Joe Stanek.
Okay. Dave.
No.
Dave Floyd.
Yeah, I concur with Joe also.
Okay. And Dean?
I think the 1 year is fine.
Okay, so that's 5. Is that correct?
Yeah. And
My
Aaron,
math right?
We need Aaron.
Aaron, I'm sorry. Aaron?
Yes. Yes, I concur with Joe Stanek as well.
Okay. And I would, based upon their input, I would vote positive for it. So it appears that you would have a positive outcome.
So am I allowed to ask you to vote then?
You don't need to. I'll ask us to vote. Do we have a resolution, Joe?
yep, resolution 2022-03. Application for a Class A Marina application. Application number is M224015, new Class A Marina. Applicant is 10 Artstone. Whereas the applicant has applied for a permit to operate a new Class A Marina facility offering sales and water-based instruction on e-foils. And whereas the Lake George Park Commission has reviewed the application, supporting documents, comments received, other information which appears in the record. And whereas the commission has made a determination that the project is an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, 6 NYCRR 617.5, and as lead agency for the purpose of the seeker, has made a determination that the project will have no significant impact on the environment. And whereas the action is considered to be a major project pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-5.3, and public notice has been published and distributed as required, the applicant has demonstrated that the facility complies with the Class A Marina requirements of 6 NYCRR 646-1.2B. And whereas the commission finds that the project will not have no adverse impact on the health, safety, or welfare of the public, the environment, or the resources of the park, will not alter the essential character of the area in which it is proposed, will not lead to the congestion in the park, and will not have an undue visual, cultural, or audible impact on the neighborhood or the park. Now, therefore, it be resolved, the Lake George Park Commission approves the above application with the following conditions: that this is a 1 year pilot program that will be evaluated after 1 year, and it will follow all of the e-foil regulations as proposed, and it's only an educational center. So moved.
Second.
Uh,
It was moved and seconded. The one question I have about the wording is reviewed at the end of 1 year. Would that allow us to terminate it? Yeah, I guess, yeah, 1 year would be, forget it. My question is moved.
Well, I also mean that if there's no complaints, that the staff is allowed to continue the permit.
Right, that's what I was trying to work around. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Motion's made and seconded. All commissioners in favor of the motion as read, signify by. And motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everybody. Now we move on to item 2, a variance request for dock modification submitted by Scrimshaw Estates Homeowners Association. Joe Thorne?
This is an application for a dock modification to an association dock in Lake George. The association had previously received variances from the commission for this complex for being offshore further than the regulations allow, specifically with respect to the mean low water mark. In past variance requests that were authorized, the commission put in a special condition that said, if and when dredging occurs, the dock shall be brought into compliance with the offshore limits for which a variance had been granted. Currently, the association is looking to do some dredging. We advise them of that condition, and sort of posed with that, they started rethinking, their dock complex, its safety and location, and have instead proposed a dock modification intended to service the HOA, and coupled with a dredging project that other agencies are looking at, and which still requires variances for offshore distance. Those variances are for a dock that'll be more than 100 feet from mean height. This dock will be about 193 feet from mean height, and they've submitted a lot of alternatives and support for this application. I can see that the HOA president, Chris Migliero, is here, and I think I also saw the agent, Mark Vischer. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, whoever wants to take the lead, and just talk a little bit more about the application.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
The homeowners association has had a long struggle with the dock complex here, mostly as a result of the consistent development of the English Brook Delta. So the dock structure in the homeowners beachfront is located trapped behind the Delta. The Delta extends out into the lake 300 feet or so in front of the beachfront. And what drove the project for the homeowners was, in fact, as Joe mentioned, the condition about dredging. And at present, the current dock needs to be dredged again. And so we undertook a process to
Mom, you okay?
evaluate that.
Well, I have to take my.
The permit application undertakes a process of evaluating the different dock structures that we could propose in front of the board. Ultimately, the goal is, as Joe pointed out, there are various other agencies involved in this project. And under most of those sets of regulations, they require a minimization of environmental impacts. And so we undertook a process to evaluate a series of dock structures. What we're proposing in front of you today is the dock structure that presents the least amount of environmental impact for the rest of the regulating agencies to work with, and at the same time provides the Lake George Park Commission board with a dock structure that comes closer to their regulations than the previous dock structure. It is a dock structure that provides 12 slips to the 12 homeowners that belong to the homeowners association. And that is the end of sort of your guys' involvement with the project. Once this is approved, if it is to be approved by you guys, this would put the homeowners in a situation where they have a viable dock structure. It's positioned in a situation where it will provide deep water access as long as possible as the Delta continues to build. It will allow minimizing impact in the future, because ultimately we are all under the belief that dredging will have to reoccur again in 7 to 10 to 12 years, depending on how the Delta grows. So this is ultimately the best situation that we could come up with, given all of the constraints and all of the regulatory packages that are involved. Now, just in summary, as we move through this, hopefully, as we conclude this in a positive way with you guys, I would request that we consider the verbiage of permit condition 38, which is what drove us into this condition, in this situation in the first place. That condition says if you dredge, you'll put the dock back where it belongs in compliance with the regs. But to do so again would cause the environmental impact that we're talking about eliminating right now. So in the long run, it would be ideal if we could reword condition 38 in such a manner that suggests that this is the best dock structure for the homeowners association. This is the dock structure that provides the least amount of environmental impact moving forward. And there is no alternative to it that is better, because we've provided that alternative to you already as part of our assessment. So that condition will continue to haunt this process if it's left in context the way it sits. You know, if that were reworded to say, if the state dredges it all up and we can move the dock or something, I mean, unless somebody's willing to dredge up the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of yards of the Delta, this is the best solution moving forward that's possible under everybody's regulatory set.
Thank you. Hang on, Joe. Anybody else from the audience? And we're at limit because I can only see part of you numerically. Would like to speak in support or as a neighbor or opposition to this project? Hearing none, seeing none. Joe Stanek?
Okay. a couple of things. One is I think because this dock is significantly extended into the lake, I would propose that one of the conditions would be that you would have a survey done and plot out exactly where the dock will be and be certified so that there's no mistakes of building it and not compatible with the application. And the second thing is that I would also suggest that we would still leave in the wording that if the English Delta were to be dredged, that the dock would then become back into consideration for being compliant with the regulations.
Okay,
I don't think there's any issue with providing a survey of the final location of the dock structure. Ultimately, to do all the dredging work and all the construction work that's necessary, all that stuff is going to have to be surveyed in as it's being built. As far as leaving the dredging condition in the permit, if we could add language to it to be more specific as to who's completing that dredging and maybe the magnitude of that dredging, I don't see a problem with leaving the condition in the permit.
Right, because we would ultimately have to dredge possibly in 7, 10, 12 years, whatever. So we don't want to get stuck with the same condition in the same place we're in now.
I think we're talking about dredging English Delta as opposed,
Right.
where it comes out as opposed to impacting your particular docks. In other words, taking a hard look at what's there now and trying to correct it from the English Delta, the brook itself.
I think ultimately English Brook Delta continues to grow. It continues to present problems with the homeowners in this situation. The homeowners now just to the north are getting that situation. The English Brook Delta problem is not going to go away. If that condition is worded in such a way that it doesn't bog down this process that's taken us 3 years of permitting battles to sort of get to this point. Again, in 7 to 10 years, that would be lovely, because to continue to go through this every 7 to 10 years until some massive entity decides to spend the millions of dollars necessary to dredge the entire delta just continues to force a huge financial burden onto the homeowners in this situation.
What I would propose is that you work with the staff to put in the correct language so that if the English Delta was dredged, that it would be, then you would consider changing the configuration of the dock.
Yeah, if I'm understanding you, Commissioner Stanek, the current language says if any dredging occurs in the area of the dock, you bring it into compliance. It sounds like what you're proposing and the applicant's agreeing to is if there's ever a dredging of the entire delta, right? So we know it's not just going to fill back into the dock,
right?
And it's going to be more of a long-term solution than perhaps a short-term maintenance solution like they're alluding to. So yeah, we could certainly draft that up if it gets voted on affirmatively.
Excluding our maintenance dredging, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yep.
Joe Tulin, was there any neighborhood comments on this project?
No, there was not. I heard from a couple neighbors just trying to understand the application a little bit better, and even came in and looked at the plans. And ultimately, no one provided any negative comments.
Any commissioners have any additional comments, questions? Hearing none, Mr. Stanek?
Resolution 2022-04. Somebody.
That's me, Joe. That's me over here discovering I was muted. What do we know about where all this stuff comes from? All this stuff, meaning the sand and whatever else comes out of English Brook. Where's that coming from? And can we intercede on the behalf of keeping the erosion problems upland that are obviously causing that delta to grow all the time? Seems like a no-win doing that. What's going on upstream of this of this delta to put that kind of silt into the lake all the time.
Yeah, Dean, I can jump in on that a little bit. I spent many years working on English Brook itself to try to minimize the amount of sediment that's coming into the brook. We installed an in-stream sediment pond. We continue to clean out, or I say we, Soil and Water continues to clean out Hubble Reservoir, which is up on the brook itself. Recently, Soil and Water restored a very large chunk of English Brook itself, working with Steuben County Soil and Water on some very good methods to keep the stream from down cutting and side cutting into the banks. There's been quite a work done there and a lot of money spent on English Brook. I have a whole presentation from my old life on the English Brook Delta and its growth. The vast majority of the material that created the Delta, those sources are gone. They've been addressed. There is always going to be some level of down cutting and side cutting, but what actually created that Delta originally, it started out with the construction of the Northway, and it's been slow progress ever since. A lot of those factors have been addressed.
Good.
Right. If we were in 1949, I'd be swimming in 30 feet of water, right?
Very close.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
don't we normally, about this point, ask the public if there's anybody who wants to speak to the application to the other side or make any comments? I don't think we're doing that at this meeting.
I did that on this project a couple of minutes ago. I admittedly did not do that on the project next to you, and if you'd like me to revisit that, you
No,
make that request. No.
I don't think it might have any impact, but I just thought, I didn't hear that we asked for the public, but okay. Thank you.
But by this, we're asking again, is there anyone from the public who has a comment about this application?
The first one about the e-boards?
No,
I
no,
do have a question about that one.
But we're not talking
Okay.
about that right now. You can bring that up in your comments at the end,
Thank you.
please. I don't hear any. Justin, you see any?
I do not.
Do not. Okay. Commissioner Stanek.
Resolution 2022-04, application for a dock modification. Application number DWM 214023, dock modification. Applicant is Scrimshaw Ventures HOA. The applicant has applied for a permit to modify an existing dock, and whereas the Lake George Park Commission has reviewed the application, supporting documents, comments received, and other information which appears in the record. And whereas the commission has made a determination that the project is a type 2 action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, 6 NYCRR 617.5, no further review is required for the purposes of the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And whereas the action is considered to be a minor project pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-5.3. Public notice has been published and distributed in accordance with the Commission regulations. Whereas the proposed dock requires variances from the Commission's regulation, specifically 646-1.1 C7, which limits the number of docks per length of lakefront, as well as 646-1.1 C2 I3, which restricts the offshore distance of the docks to within 100 feet of the mean high water mark. And whereas the commission finds that the project will have no adverse impact on the health, safety, or welfare of the public, the environment, or the resources of the park, will not alter the essential character of the area in which it is proposed, will not lead to congestion in the park, and will not have an undue visual, cultural, or audible impact on the neighborhood of the park. Now therefore be resolved, the Lake George Park Commission hereby approves the above application with the following conditions: that the dock location be certified by a survey, and that the applicant works with the staff to ensure that if the English Delta ever gets completely dredged, that the dock will be revisited for meeting the regulations. So moved.
Second.
Motion's made, motion seconded, as amended, written. All in favor, signify, please. Any nays? I can't see any, so I'll take it that there's none. Motion is carried. Project is approved. Congratulations and good luck. I've been there and I have in my mind what your problems are.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. Variance request for new dock construction submitted by Green Island LG LLC, Town of Bolton. Mr. Joe.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Let me clarify and apologize. On the agenda, this actually does not require a variance. That was my oversight. This is simply an application for two docks that meet the requirements. One is a covered boathouse, one is a sun deck on the northwest side of Green Island. These docks will be on the western side in a small cove. Because it's two docks, this does represent a major project. It's a little bit more significant than usual, and certainly an area that we're all familiar with and gets lots of traffic. So it seemed appropriate to bring it to the board. Jeff Anthony, as luck would have it, is also representing the applicant. In this instance, Jeff, I can't, oh, there you are. So Jeff, I'd invite you to talk a little bit more about the application and then address any questions the board might have.
Thanks, Joe. The application is by the Queen Family Trust, and the parcel is at the north end of Green Island on North Island Road, and it occupies approximately about 1,680 linear feet of shoreline on both the east and west shores of Green Island. The Queen Family Trust is occupied by the parents who have resided there for years seasonally, and Andy and Jeff Queen, who have several children amongst the two of them. And so the family, this is a family trust property, which they all engage in using at one time of the year or other. And they're not all there at once, they come and go and whatever. So the application is to build two new wharfs for them on the west shore of Green Island. Basically, it's in Sawmill Bay and facing Bolton Landing shoreline there, opposite the park and Norwalls Marina. There is one boathouse there now, and so this would be their third boathouse or third dock on the property. We made application to the Lake George Park Commission several months ago, and we did get back a letter respondent request for more information. And specifically, there were three, other than technical comments like height of the buildings or boathouse, some dimensions and water lines and things like that, which were all answered. There were three other specific questions that were requested of us that had to be complied with before the commission could review this. The first one was that we would have to get approval from the Town of Bolton, since this is covered under their local land use program. And the reason why it's covered under their local land use program is that Sagamore PUD was created, and these two lots at the north end of Green Island were part of that PUD. And so there were provisions in that PUD, which was approved by Bolton and the Adirondack Park Agency, which had criteria in it that had to be met. So we had to get approval from the town and present that to the commission. The second one was that we get ruling by the Adirondack Park Agency that whether it was jurisdictional or not. And the third one was that we get certification from the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation that there would not have any impact on cultural resources. So we got all three of those over the last year, roughly. We have a letter of no effect, let's call it, from the State Historic Preservation Office, and that's been on file. We sent it to the Park Commission. We have a letter of non-jurisdiction from the Adirondack Park Agency, even though they were party to the approval of the PUD. Their legal staff elected to determine that they had no jurisdiction on this project and passed total jurisdiction on to both the town and the Park Commission. And then we went to the town. And what we did with the town of Bolton was we asked for a variance from the PUD to allow additional dock to be placed on this parcel. The PUD did have a restriction in it of one dock per lot. There were 2 lots up there, and no boathouses on the docks, and no boathouses on the east shore of Green Island for these 2 lots. And so, being a PUD, that is essentially a zone district, just like any other zone district in Bolton or anywhere else. And as part of the PUD, there are criteria in it, which are area and bulk requirements, which have to be met. So the process of getting a variance from the PUD was appropriate. And it was suggested by Attorney Mueller at the time, who was the town attorney. So we did go through the variance procedure with the town of Bolton, and we were approved unanimously to have an additional dock or docks on this parcel, along with the boathouse. So that provision in the Sagamore PUD was varied by the Zoning Board of Appeals in Bolton. So we did seek all 3 consultations that were requested by the Park Commission, and we did receive favorable comment from all 3 agencies. And we responded to the technical comments, which were the remainder of the request for additional information by the Park Commission, and provided that information to the commission. So with that, we're now here in front of you requesting that these 2 wharfs be approved. And Joe, I guess you might have some comments about the availability of dock rights and other things that we talked about, but that's certainly your prerogative and your expertise, and you're the gatekeeper on that information. So I bow to you.
Sure, I can cover that if the board is interested. As Jeff mentioned, this is part of a larger unit, development plan, which involves the Sagamore Resort. And to get all the docks that are at the Sagamore required a certain amount of lakefront, some of which was borrowed from these other northern residential lots. As I go through conservatively, the lakefront for each of the lots in that parent parcel back in the 80s, prior to subdivision, conservatively end up with, and miraculously, for a maximum of 46 docks. Right now, there are 44 docks on the island, as previously itemized by Molly and all her work at the Sagamore and all the other facilities. So, looking at it strictly, there's room for 2 more docks, which by chance is exactly what they're asking for. If I look at, we also, Bendes and Steve's generously provided some survey work that they'd done previously. Surveys are always going to find more nooks and crannies and lakefront than a more generic tax map. So that only affords more lakefront and possibly more docks, ranging from possibly 47 to 49 in total. But in short, looking at this from a few different angles, there is sufficient lake frontage on the island. And also on this lot specifically, if any docks are going to be allotted anywhere, this one has a surplus with respect to its own individual lakefront, having almost 1,600 feet of lakefront. So the density certainly works out. Jeff, I just want to clarify one statement that you made. I think you mentioned that the zoning board approved it unanimously. I believe there were 2 that appear to be opposed, but the motion did carry, and the ZBA did pass the requested variance. So
Sorry about that, Joe. I misspoke there.
Yeah, no worries.
Is there any other party to speak to this project? Justin, we see anybody?
Not yet. Scrolling. Doesn't appear so.
Okay. Joe Toolen, have we received any public comment on this project?
We have not. Nope.
We have not. Okay. Hearing none. No one's responded. Joe Stanek, do you have a report from your visiting group?
Yes, well, we all visited it. I guess it was 5 commissioners or 4. And we didn't have any problems with it. It's certainly a large area and sufficient to handle the additional 2 wharfs. And I think there was all positive comments made at the site.
Okay. Any commissioners have any individual comments? Hearing none, I'll ask for a resolution.
Resolution 2022-05. Application number DWM 21-4066, new docks. Applicant is Green Island LG LLC. The applicant has applied for a permit to construct 2 new docks, and the Lake George Park Commission has reviewed the application, supporting documents, comments received, and other information which appears in the record. And whereas the commission has made a determination that the project is a type 2 action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act 6 NYCRR 617-5, and no further action is required for the purposes of the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And whereas the action considered to be a major project pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-5.3, public notice has been published and distributed in accordance with the commission regulation. And whereas the proposed docks comply with the regulatory design requirements for docks at 646-1.1. And whereas the commission finds the project will not have an adverse impact on the health, safety, or welfare of the public, the environment, or the resources of the park, will not alter the essential character of the area in which it is proposed, will not lead to congestion in the park, will not have an undue visual, cultural, audible impact on the neighborhood or the park. Now therefore be resolved, the Lake George Park Commission hereby approves the above application as proposed. So moved.
Motion made. Second is made. All in favor of the motion, signify please. Any nays amongst the commission? Hearing none, this project is approved as asked for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, item 6 on your agenda, the Law Enforcement Committee report. The Law Enforcement Committee, I'll respond as chairman of the Law Enforcement Committee. We met at 9:30 this morning by Zoom, and Lieutenant Johns gave us an update on some new equipment that was coming to us via New York State Parks and Recreation equipment provisions. Talked about new engines. We don't expect any large purchases to occur during 2022, which is great budget news. We have submitted our paperwork to New York State Parks and Recreation, and they will reimburse us for certain expenses, including some training on Lake George. We did not go into executive session to review any enforcement issues. So resolution 2022-06, whereas the Law Enforcement Committee met via teleconference on January 25th, 2022 to review matters pertaining to the Lake George Park Commission's Marine Patrol and the Commission's Law Enforcement Program. And whereas the Law Enforcement Committee has reported on the results of that committee meeting at this full commission meeting, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee recommends acceptance of this month's law enforcement report, now therefore be it resolved that the commission accepts the report of the Law Enforcement Committee. I look for a motion on that. Seeing a motion, and a second has been made already. All in favor, please signify. Are there any nays on this issue? And that resolution is carried. That completes our major agenda items. We are now going to go to public comments. It's 11:42. I don't know how large of a group we have because on Zoom, I'm limited by who I can see and whatnot. Justin will be our, I hate the term, but I'll use it, gatekeeper. I'm going to request that public comments be kept to a minimum. And if there are multiple public comments on the same subject, that perhaps the following commenters would refer to the comments made previously and just not repeat those words. Doing that, Justin, do we have a cue start? And Ms. Copeland, I interrupted you or I cut you off earlier. You had a question, so I'll call on you first.
Thanks, Ken. I am new to this, so I have two questions about Lake George Park Commission, the way you do things. So the approval of the application for the 1 year of the e-foil, in 1 year's time, is it an automatic approval if you've approved for something 1 year, or do they have to present it again and for a longer time, or do you just go on what they have presented now?
Our staff is qualified to interview with the applicant, with the marina, and make a conclusion. If they have any questions, they'll bring it back before the full commission.
And during this year, is there any observance that the Lake George Park Commission does to make sure that they are in compliance?
Yeah, the Marine Patrol will be by there on a regular basis. You've got neighbors that will report any objections that they have. And if any issues are raised by any parties, the Park Commission will institute, lack of a better term, an investigation or a review.
Perfect. Thank you.
So it's not an automatic thing, but if all things are equal and they're doing what we've asked them to do and nobody has an issue with it, it would be renewed for another period of time, a year.
Perfect. And my other question, only because in the past year I have zoomed into 3 or 4, maybe 3 Lake George Park Commission meetings. And I have never been present when there has been more than 6 commissioners.
Wow.
So I am curious as to what is if there are 12 meetings a year, is there X number of meetings that commissioners must attend live? I'm just curious as to how this works as a New York State entity.
Okay, I'm going to answer your first part of your question as a coincidence as to the 6 commissioners. It periodically happens due to personal lives of non-compensated commissioners. We regularly have, I think our complement is 10 actually. And every once in a while we won't have one. We only accentuate the 6 commissioners when we have a project that it's only fair to the applicant that they need 100% of the vote. If you have 9 commissioners, then you don't need 100% of the vote on your average project. So your observation is just coincidental. There are a lot of meetings where everybody's there. There are meetings in some locations where we have to share chairs practically. There'll be a full complement. So
Awesome.
that just has to do
that
with,
is just my
right.
observation of the 3 meetings that I've been to. Someone has had to, Bruce, I think, said it, that we only had 6.
That's correct. And speaking of Bruce, that might be appropriate right now for me to continue to advise everybody that Bruce and his wife are continuing to recover. And he was expected to be here this morning, but I believe that they had a personal issue at home. And we look forward to both of their continued rapid recovery.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation. And we look forward, nobody dislikes the Zoom concept more than myself and the rest of the commission. And we enjoy being with the people and being prepared to listen to them. Justin?
So I see Lorraine Carbagnan has had her hand up. Lorraine, go ahead.
Thank you. I think I see that the representative from Studio A has left. I don't know if he's still here, but my comment had to do with the e-foils on Harris Bay. He did mention that they would not operate during busy times, busy boat traffic times, but in the summer, weekends on Harris Bay are extremely busy with boat traffic going in and out of the marinas. Harris Bay seems to be a target spot for tubers and water skiers because they feel that they're off the main lake. So I don't know how he would monitor that to make sure the e-foils are not out on the lake during busy times during the summer. Also, there were e-foilers this past summer, and I believe with an instructor, many of them wore black wetsuits, even though it was in the summer. And that makes them even less visible, I think, to boaters and people out on the water. So as a safety issue, if this is going to be permitted, which I think from the vote that you passed it for the year, I would suggest that they be forced to wear something like a colorful penny to make them more visible to boaters and others out on the water.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Justin?
I don't see any other hands up. If anyone would like to make a comment, you can raise your hand or begin.
I do want to.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I was at Hewlett's Landing 2 weeks ago in the middle of a snowstorm, and the guy who plows my mother's driveway, said to me a question about the herbicide and why were they doing it in a certain bay, because the name of Sheep Meadow Bay did not line up with anything that Hewlett's residents are aware of, that being Hewlett's Bay. I have already told this to Dave, but I think that everyone should hear this. And a person who lives off of Sheep Meadow Lane, which is a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles from Sheep Meadow Bay, which we don't know where that name came from, was upset because he had received a letter from the Lake George Park Commission, of which I have a copy, that they were going to put the herbicide in a bay next to his home. And so I am just saying that this one person received this letter inappropriately, and it was a little bit shocking because he does take his water from that bay, and the picture was not quite clear enough of where Sheep Meadow Bay was. And I spent some time trying to say, but it's okay, but we will figure out where this is going to take place. I am just telling you this, that if one person received a letter inappropriately, it might be worth someone checking those addresses to make sure that no one else at Hewlett's Landing or near the other site received a letter inappropriately.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. That's the kind of information that we need. And if there's an issue, we'll correct it as quickly as possible.
Thank
Justin?
you.
Would anyone else like to make a comment? I see Patricia has her hand up. Patricia, go ahead.
Yes, I'm a resident of Harris Bay. I am not near Bill Mason's establishment, but I just want to totally agree with the woman who spoke to the e-foils a few minutes ago. She was spot on in requiring the individuals on those e-foils to wear something bright that you can see. We're on a virtual highway over here, and the amount of water skiing and there's a lot of it over here. We also have a couple of Miami Vice boats that come and make the loop all the way down to where the end of the bay. There's no way they're going to see these people. I mean, it looks like great fun and they're quiet. It's wonderful. But you just voted and said that it was not a safety issue. And I think it is a safety issue. And I also know that I may be talking to the wrong commission if the town of Queensbury approved this. I just don't think it's a good place for it. And I think it places a lot of responsibility, and I don't know if the word is liability, to the driver of the boats. we don't want anything to happen, but they're hard to see. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Justin?
Anybody else wish to make a comment?
Move to adjourn.
I was going to say, you know what the next question is going to be. Move to adjourn has been made. A second is being made. All in favor of adjourning today's meeting, signify by. And I know I hear no nays. And I thank you all for your participation and look forward to seeing you again. Maybe quite quickly in person. Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.